Happy to have Connor McCullough on. We took a trip not long ago, and idea came to mind of like having an opportunity to talk to somebody with quite honestly, a totally different view of things. But however, the more we talk, the more I realize that like he really wants the same thing that I want. He still loves his country just as much as I do. I think what we agreed to is two different paths, same destination. And so I'm going to let Connor kind of talk about what his experience in life has been, kind of when you grew up, different things that you did. And so I am glad to have you on here, and just tell us a little bit about yourself, Connor. You're obviously much younger than me. So
yeah, absolutely happy to be here. Happy for the opportunity for the conversation. Like you said, like we both come from different backgrounds, different walks of life. And so we have different approaches, different thought processes. I know I tend to lean left of center based on how I've grown up, but also working where I have, it's given me opportunities to challenge that belief. So growing up, single mom raising me the best she could, never, really in a well-off situation, always kind of hovering, just above sort of the poverty line area. But she worked at Shenandoah University for most of my upbringing. So I grew up on a liberal arts college campus. I got to meet people from all over the world, got to meet some really interesting Americans. I got to meet the last man to ever walk on the moon, Harrison Schmitt.
Okay.
So just being able to, in my formative years, talk to people, meet people, and sort of develop a worldview of we're all in this kind of together, and everyone is just trying their best with what they have at their disposal. And for some people, that's positive, and for some people, that's maybe not the best of situations. So growing up, I was fortunate to have that background. I was fortunate somehow my mom managed to pull it off that I was able to go to like a private elementary school and got a really good early education. I went to school here in Winchester for high school, went to Hanley High School, which as at the time I thought it had a very good education as well. I would push myself to take the more advanced classes and really try and read and explore stuff. And then went to college down in, I guess, Harrisonburg-ish area, went to Bridgewater, another sort of liberal arts college, but it was an opportunity.
Church of the Brethren type thing.
Oh yeah. There's definitely some affiliations there, and it was, again, it's something where I'm not necessarily a religious person myself, but being around that and exposed to it, it adds to that perspective. And so sort of growing up, my dad has always been in the picture, good relationship. My mom and dad are separated, so I only got to see him infrequently, but he tended to be that right of center voice. My mom was always left of center, strong, independent woman, worked her ass off all the time. Can't speak highly enough of her and how much she really invested in me and my growth and my future, and, trying to give me the best life I had. My dad did exactly the same to the best of his ability.
I think what's cool about that is that, yeah, you were limited, but your mom gave you a lot of exposure to a lot of different things. So is there anything in that time frame that you look at and you're like, hey, this is when I realized you obviously have two competing viewpoints with your dad and your mom. How did you decide to kind of go towards kind of the left of center?
I mean, I think the initial was just I was around my mom more. I would see my dad every other weekend, so it was kind of what I was raised in for the most part. But I think more than anything, it was being with my mom and seeing someone who, though we didn't have a lot, we never had a lot of money, never had a lot of chance for upward growth, so to speak. My mom was very giving. She would take in students that needed a place to stay over winter break. Everyone at the university sort of saw her as like everyone's mom away from mom. If they had a problem, they would come to her. She was generous with what money she did have. She would, take students out to dinner, order pizza when people needed it, like just little things with what little money we did have. She was very kind and giving and generous of it. And that sort of translated over to me in my, I think, viewpoint of the only way to help is to be giving, is to, if you can make someone's day or someone's situation a little bit better, if it's, buying a dinner or if it's just listening, I think that kind of shaped early on of that, the importance of understanding that we all are in a situation, we all are in our own heads and our own lives, and we don't know who's got what going on, and trying to be conscientious of that in any conversation and approach any conversation like the ones we had on our trip, in coming from a place of respect and decency and honesty, and knowing that we don't have to be right, we don't have to be wrong, but it's important to listen to each other.
Well, one of the things I hear when you're talking is I think a lot of people on the right, because that's where I lean towards, would say you're just trying to impose your will of like giving things away on other people in this country, but you grew up giving what little you had to other people. So it's not like you were replicating what you saw day in and day out. So when you look at the world, you look at it as our country is an extension of you, and we should help people
Mhm.
in need in and around us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So any event that you can think of that you're like, was it when the kids came up, you had college kids here, or what was it that you looked at and you're like, really think that that's the way things should be done?
Well, I think it was, I don't know if there was ever like one specific thing kind of growing up, because I think it was my exposure being at a liberal arts college through, I'm talking 4 years old through 23 years old or so. Um, but I remember moments here and there where something that was happening bigger than I could understand because I was 8 or 10 or whatever. I remember one of them being the gay rights movement and going through the Supreme Court of all of that.
Mhm.
There was a pretty sizable gay population at Shenandoah. And so seeing how that directly was affecting people I knew in my life, and that these things that are these big picture ideas that are just on the news, they're a headline, they're a topic, whatever it may be, it brought it into the reality of like, no, this actually affects people. This actually is things that people are, worried about. Are they going to be able to have a life with this person that they care about and they love, and they just want to give them everything that I was given, love from my parents. They want to do the same. And, it's this legal battle. And so, and having those situations, immigration too, there's aspects of, we had students at Shenandoah from all over the globe, from Ghana and Haiti and China, and just you name a place, there was a student from there. And I got to meet a lot of these people and hear about what life was like in their countries, and what made here, America, so appealing to so many people. And to me, that kind of gave me this perspective of like what defines the quote unquote American dream is being in a place where you're safe and you're respected and you have opportunity, not necessarily to, I don't believe that the American dream is to be a billionaire, but to have a house and a family and be safe and secure in your own front yard is invaluable. And
Right.
and meeting these people, hearing people coming from places where they had to walk 20 miles to get water from a well, or maybe 20 is a bit of an exaggeration, but they had to walk a couple miles a day to go get water from a well and bring it back, and had to do that every single day because they didn't have running water. Um, we met a gentleman, I think from Ghana. I don't quite remember, but I know it was an African country, who was fascinated by electric fences to keep cattle in, solar powered electric fences. And it was just something they never thought of. And so these moments of me, moments in time of seeing people learning or experiencing something they never have.
Right. So when you look at all those things, I think you pretty much covered like that's how you adopted your worldview. But I think one of the things that I think a lot of people on the right want to like, I think both sides, they sit there and they want to put you inside of a box, and they want to be comfortable inside that box, and they want to say, okay, there's no way there's a human being on the other end of this. And I think one of the things that was really cool about our trip was just hearing the other side, and there are facts that support both sides. And I think unfortunately right now what happens is one side picks a talking point and that's all they stick on, and it doesn't include all the other different parts of information and things like that. So for me, what I obviously I feel like I don't ever want to say, I think it's easy for me to say like, well, I think I'm fair. I don't know that that's,
We all think we are.
yeah. And so, but for me, when I look at it and I think about fairness, I think, okay, I look at Fox News. I think Fox News has started to drift. But I also look at the BBC,
Mhm.
and I also look at Al Jazeera. I think I think Fox and Al Jazeera are like two entirely different spectrums. When you look at what's going on in Gaza, you would think that they're two different, and two different events altogether if you listen to Al Jazeera and Fox News reporting on the same event. And so how do you like balance that out from the left leaning side? Let's just call it left. Leaning is not correct.
I'm left, you're right.
It's
fine. For the purpose of this conversation, we can just
we
leave
won't
it at
we
that.
won't we won't we won't wear a name tag like I'm right, you're on the left.
Yeah.
But like, where do you get your news from, and where do you go to get your information? Because one of the things that was really cool early on is we did a project at Liberty University, and one of the things that those kids said is, I mean, they're 19, 20 years old, and they're talking about where they get their news. But again, their filter is through, because of who their influences are on the right side. So where on the left side do you feel like you can get accurate information?
Well, and I think the unfortunate truth generally is that the accuracy of information is very poor. Yeah, it's, and especially right now with the state of things and the tension of things, it's really hard to, with any definitive stance, say, oh, this source is 100% right 100% of the time. It's just not. The fact of the matter is it isn't.
Right.
And I think so. The example that I always give for this type of point was, I was driving to visit some friends in Boston on January 6th, a couple years back, when all that stuff popped off.
Right.
And I was getting all these text messages like, hey, don't go near DC. Like, I had no idea what was happening. I was up past Philly. It didn't matter to me. But
unless they go north, we're good.
Exactly. But in the moment, I'm like, all right, sounds like something's popping off. I should probably pay attention. And so at the time I had satellite radio. So I scrolled over to CNN's news channel and I listened for about 15 or so minutes. And I know full and well that CNN is one of the more left leaning, or at least has become one of the more left leaning news sources. So out of respect for me understanding things, I then switched over to Fox News, which again, we know has kind of fallen more to the right.
Right.
And so I would listen for 10 minutes or so to each one of them and flip back and forth. And at the end of it, I got the gist of, oh, okay, people broke into the Capitol to try and affect the election process and yada, yada, yada.
Right.
Did I know all of it? No, but I knew enough to get the gist of what was happening and understand that, you know, both sides were presenting the same basic information, but with two very different perspectives. And so I think, like, when I go and try and look into a subject, like some of the ones we've talked about, I typically start with the New York Times, because I just get breaking news updates from them, have for a while. I know that the New York Times is left of center. And so I know that take everything with a grain of salt, but it's typically where I start. I enjoy how they write. I think it reads well, to put it simply. They get to the point pretty well.
Right.
But then from there, what's always important is, pop over. I admittedly don't use Fox News all that much, just because to me, they've always come across
many clicks.
Well, it's more they've come across to me a little more on the extreme rhetoric at times, which I'm sure you could say the exact same thing about the New York Times. But there are sources that are more centered. Reuters is one that typically, as best as can be, stays pretty down the middle.
Right.
And so a lot of times that's where I'll default to. I'll get a headline and I'll get the gist of a story, but if it's something I want to dig into, I'll go to Reuters, I'll go to Politico. There are a couple others. I don't think Politico is necessarily straight down the middle. I think they do lean left. But I think the key thing with anyone trying to be true to a subject and honest to trying to learn is understanding that A, you can be wrong. It's okay to be wrong and learn something and change your opinion, change your mind on something. And B, don't put yourself in your own echo chamber. If you just want the answer that you want to get and you stop at that, you're not going to challenge yourself to actually explore the validity of a subject, and listen to people of a different side. Really, don't pigeonhole yourself into one thought process and then think it's the one and only.
I think one of the things I hear you say is more than anything is you don't go into it. You might read a headline, but you don't go into it saying this is the only way that it is. Like there's no chance that this you go in there with your eyes wide open, it sounds like, as opposed to, I feel like on both sides, we just hit the gas and we're like, we're right, boom, we're gone. And I think that's a mistake. I think it's a mistake. And I think one of the things that I thought this weekend when we were talking about doing this show is I think our leaders I think just in the name itself, our leadership, I think it's a epic failure of our leadership on both sides, because they're supposed to be leading on the way we should handle ourselves. Obviously, the way we were raised have a lot to do with it, but I do feel like we are so quick to look at our leaders and go, oh, that's the way we need to be. And I know for a while there, when they used to talk about athletes and things like that, they're like, don't pattern yourself after an athlete. I would say at this point, don't pattern yourself over anybody that's in leadership, because all they're doing is trying to stir up their side, get their one point across. Mm-hmm. And I feel like as the American public, we are going to have to lead ourselves out of this mess that we're in, because I think they're so busy trying to take a side, and both sides, like the far left, they're trying to appease AOC and all those people that are trying to stir it up on that side. And then we have Ben Shapiro and all these other people that are like throwing, it's just the craziness. If people would just take a breath and look at it and go, that doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense. And it sounds really good. It's very entertaining, but at the end of the day, I can tell you, and I think both of our experiences, but like for me as an investigator working in law enforcement, one of the things that I've learned is you could talk to three people that went through the same experience and their stories are going to be very, very different. And it's where their stories intersect is where the truth is. And I think that's one of the problems right now in political rhetoric and everything else, is that we are not taking the time to say, okay, here's the right side, here's the left side. Where they intersect is probably going to be where the truth is. And it's not like one side's not right, one side's not wrong. It is. And I think accepting the fact that, like, as much as people want to say, oh, well, the left is horrible people, the right's horrible people, I think in talking to you and talking to other people, both sides have the same goals. They both want an America that, like what you said, that your mom taught you to be giving. I think we all want a country that's giving. And I think that kind of springs us into our next conversation. I'm going to go out of order because I can. Let's go straight to immigration, because I feel like Venezuela is like, that's low hanging fruit. We'll get to that in a minute. But like from immigration, like when you look at it, tell me what you see when you look at it. Obviously we know the right talking points, and I want to preface it by saying the people that are saying the Afghan national that killed that female National Guard soldier, horrible death, and injured, and the shot. They both died.
I don't know if the
other guy I think is still alive. Last I heard. Okay, but at the end of the day, we want it. It fits the rhetoric on the right of like these immigrants are violent, horrible people. That is not an immigrant problem. I think we both agree. I think that's one thing that we can both agree on. That 100% is a policy that is bad. That dude did our dirty work, worked with our special operations people, and went after terrorists for 20 years on behalf of the United States of America. And in return, we brought him over here, and I would almost guarantee you his family has suffered and died because of his involvement with the United States of America. So it's not a rhetoric. For me, it's not like, hey, here's another crazy immigrant that's committing crime. No, this is a dude that was wronged by this country, and we did not do what we needed to do. What he did was absolutely horrendous, horrible, attacking, a soldier who's just serving their country. And like I said, we can get into that later as far as, all the stuff that flows from the left on,
Mhm.
like, oh, it's horrible that the National Guard. But the reality is that is the National Guard's mission, is to supplement law enforcement in bad situations. And I don't think anybody that's gone to the nation's capital and seen some of the stuff that's going on there can say like that's a safe place. So anyway, let's go back to immigration and talk about like what your view of immigration is.
So, well, and I think you're absolutely right, that the presentation on how you take that situation and how it was immediately essentially poster childed into talking about a whole group of people when it was a lone individual's awful choice for reasons we don't know yet.
Right.
But you look at it, that doesn't define a people. So for me, immigration is one that's first and foremost wildly complicated. You start pulling on any thread and it's going to be connected to 12 others. It is not a straightforward conversation. It is not a straightforward subject. And for anyone I think this is key, is for anyone to try and narrow it down to one issue is doing a disservice to the whole conversation. Because it's not, if it was a simple problem, it would be a simple fix. And we know it isn't a simple fix because it's not a simple problem. So for me, when I look at the United States and immigration, if you look at the history of this country, we were built on immigrants. We came here from the original 13 colonies, came from Europe. We weren't originally here. The only people were Native Americans, and even then they came across the Bering Strait. So people didn't exist here. This entire piece of land was developed by immigration. The foundation of America was, Irish people getting off the boat in New York and immediately being handed a loaf of bread and a musket or rifle and sent south to fight for the Union. You had people being brought over, you had your Chinese immigrants coming and building the Transcontinental Railroad, coming halfway across the country. And so you look, and every step along the way, we've had immigration, and there's been a group of immigrants that were ostracized, whether it was the Irish in the 1800s, where they were looked at as this criminality breeding group of lessers, until the next group came along. And then it was the Italians in the early 1900s. And you got some of the Germans coming out, Germans and Japanese after World War II. They were the next villains. And so we as a country, we've always had immigration, and we've always had a targeted immigrant group that we've scapegoated, essentially. It's unfortunate, but it's how it's always been. And so to sit and look, do I think that it needs to be no fence, open door, walk on in, whatever you want? No, that's not helpful. That's not a quality policy. You and I talked, one of my criticisms of the previous administration was the handling of the southern border. That's where I do lean a little more conservative. But the fact of the matter is, for me, to close off the country as a whole violates what the country was founded on, violates how it was built, how we became one of the greatest countries on the planet. I think, we talked about this in the van, that I don't necessarily agree with that statement right now. And it's not because I hate America or whatever, but it's because I'm realistic with the aspect of we have room to grow. There are things that we aren't necessarily doing well. There are ways that we could improve, and to just follow this platitude of greatest country in the world, no questions asked, we do nothing wrong. That's not healthy for growth, and that's not healthy for an individual or for a nation. You have to be able to admit when things aren't quite right.
So from the left standpoint, what do we need to do to make, not to borrow a point, but what does the left say? How do we make America great again? Like, what does the left say? Obviously, on the right, we say immigration, like security at the border, shutting the border down from a standpoint of people, unknowns coming across the border, but also mass deportations. We'll get into that as far as what that looks like. I don't agree with the way some of that's being done. But again, the federal government, in my opinion, is built on numbers. It's the number of people that are on welfare. It's the number of people of this. And I don't disagree that like it is fine that we're deporting people that have committed heinous crimes and that are not contributing to this country in a way that's beneficial to this country. But like we said on both sides is accountability. Like, is your program working? Are you doing what needs to be done to make it better? But I think the right talking points is, and I think overwhelming, well, not overwhelming, but well above 50% of the population said the immigration policy that we have is failed. We are being overrun. Services, because of COVID and ultimately immigration right after that, has overwhelmed our healthcare system and a lot of other things that we just do not have the infrastructure for that big of an influx. And I think that's one of the things that people don't realize is we have the same number of immigrants that are, and again, we can argue the legal, illegal view of that, but we have more immigrants than we have. To just put it in perspective, there are more people who could be deemed illegal here that have not come through the channels that the country was designed for originally. They have come through and haven't assimilated to what we believe in, what this country was built on. Because I think one of the things is we were when you talk about immigrants, it's escaping a bad situation, coming here and contributing here. And I think there are a lot of people that aren't here legally that are contributing on a day-to-day basis. But when you look at what's happened in Minnesota, it's also the other side of it is it's abused. And so from the left side, policy wise, what works well to make America the greatest country in the world?
And I think off the cuff is honesty. If you look at any of these subjects, you can pick your talking point and jump on it. You can say there's an immigration issue and our country's being flooded, that whole bit, which sure, absolutely, you can find information to back up that stance. But when you look at it and you go, okay, so what's the left asking for? The left is not asking for open borders, come in, do like, for the most part. From my understanding, again, we can ignore the far 20% of the left and the far 20% of the right. Those are the extreme ends, and there's no talking to either side of that. Regardless, it just wants to bicker. So in that middle group, that middle 60, in looking at it, the problem is acknowledged on both sides. You can pull up videos of Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or pick any Democrat from throughout the years of them saying we need to seal up the southern border, we need to focus on immigration, we need to focus on deportations. You can go through the whole rhetoric of Obama deported X amount of millions of people, Biden deported X amount of millions of people. Those talking points are there. It's not exclusively left or right policy stance. But where I think the left wants to come in is we want people to come here the right way.
Okay.
But there's more than one right way to do that. When you look at, you start looking at Dreamers, or I think DACA was one, or these other pathways to citizenship. You look, take the Afghan, to kind of circle back to that a little bit. We had a policy following the pullout of Afghanistan where if you were supporting us, if you were a translator, if you were aiding, you could get a special something or other visa to come here, because we knew well and good that if we left them there, they'd be killed.
Right.
And they helped us, so we need to, like, that's helpful. And I support that. I think that was the way it should be. I believe in our asylum seeking program, in the sense of it's important because there are places where I can't sit in, pick a country and file all the paperwork and make all the phone. I might not even have a phone to make phone calls or internet to send an email. So I have to flee. I have to come across the border. I have to find, especially if I have kids or a family, push comes to shove, I'm getting out. And I can't necessarily wait for the right way. But it's what you do after that. And so these different pathways to citizenship, I think, are important. Now, are they flawed? Sure. The asylum program, people can come in, request asylum while it's being processed. They're still here kind of in this legal limbo of, until a decision's made, you're both legally here and illegally here. And a lot of people just disappear. They stop showing up to immigration hearings. They stop, doing all this. They stop following the path because they get caught up. They still have to work. They still have to feed a family. That there are things that are become more important. Um, back under Obama's tenure, he gave amnesty that if you'd been in this country for 5 years and you've been contributing and you don't have a criminal record, you can come out of the woodwork and try and get right with the government, as he put it. And I think those things are important.
Do you have any data on how that worked? Obviously, the population. I think one of the things that neither side admits to is we've had, depending on your estimates, over 10. I think they said between 10 and 12 million illegals here at any given time. I think that's the figure that I hear thrown around.
Typically I'm seeing between 10 and 14. And that's where let's have the honest conversation part and not the clickbait, left, right talking point. So, the one that I always heard for a while was, oh, there were 12 million or 10 million illegals flooded the border under Biden during the pandemic. And again, sort of, but not quite. What I've seen is we were at about 10 million, and then about 4 more million came through, which is still a big number, and we absolutely can talk on that point.
Yeah.
But the 10 million claim was encounters. That's turnaways at the border. That's detentions. That's people that try and come across and are like, hey, no, and they leave. So the actual, I think ICE defines it as like the getaway number, the ones that got past us, was somewhere between 2 and 4 million. Which again,
so how are those classified from the left standpoint? How are those classified as whether they're, so if you come here, you're seeking asylum, you're in a holding pattern and you don't show up, at what point are you classified as illegal based on your viewpoint?
So from my understanding, if I'm here seeking asylum, mm-hmm. and I fail to start, I just disappeared. I stopped coming to my hearings. I stopped doing work because the asylum process can take years for some people.
Right.
Now I'm an undocumented immigrant, or I'm an illegal immigrant, however you want to spin it. If I don't have the right paperwork to be here, I am undocumented. And I think that again, kind of, taking a step back, is having the conversation you're actually trying to have. So if we're talking about immigration and we're talking about illegals coming here, it's like, okay, the left wants to allow illegal. No, we want pathways, and the right wants to close the pathways, is the perception.
Right.
You look at Trump took the access, I think it was Haiti, Colombia, Nicaragua, and Peru, some combination of 4 Central American countries that had special visas because things were going very Honduras, that was the other one, because things were going so poorly in their countries. It was like, hey, here's an express line to get out of your country into safety, and then we can start the process here. It was a pathway to citizenship.
Okay.
And so if the conversation is, do we need to limit those pathways? Great, that's a whole conversation we can have. Is it immigrants are flooding the border? No. Yes and no. I mean, of course they are, because people are trying to come to a country that they're told is the greatest country. So why would they not want to come here? But is it really a flood?
Or somebody on your side sent a invitation out. We won't talk about it. Well, I mean, we can.
Yeah, you're good.
I mean, did Joe Biden not invite immigrants here? We're open.
I think so. Again, I
know you're
I
young.
fault him for some of that,
but I think I think I hear everything you're saying, and I do not disagree. The only problem is that we are overwhelmed, and nobody can provide a plausible explanation as to why our healthcare sucks so bad, and why. I've read a book on capitalism recently, and I think I have a clearer understanding of why prescription drugs and the medical profession is so bad, is because there's no competition anymore. You've got 4 or 5 of the biggest companies, and they have a monopoly on services, and so they can set the prices at whatever, and we're forced to pay them. And unfortunately, our elected officials are more supported, or however you want to look at it, that both sides are getting a ton of money from the groups that are controlling I think what I read in that book, it was, what was the guy's name? Friedman?
Milton Friedman.
Okay.
He kind of is credited as changing capitalism. I want to say it was like the late 60s, early 70s. He wrote a book that essentially, from my understanding, again, I don't know much about, I know a little bit about a lot of stuff, but by no means am an expert on anything. But essentially changing the approach to capitalism to going from competition at the best price. So, Coke and Pepsi trying to make the best product they can at the most competitive price, to stock growth, to the success of a company is based on the value of their stock, and that the purpose, it's a fiduciary responsibility to make as much money for your investors as you can.
And I think that's the problem is one of the things that this book said was that 1% of the population owns well over 50, probably
it's like 65% of wealth is controlled by
the stocks. The stocks are controlled by the 1% of the population. Well, that 1% of the population is the same population that is paying lobbyists tons of money to go to DC and go to Richmond, Virginia, and tell the people that are supposed to be, that we elect, what they need to do. One of the positive things I think in our conversation about elected officials, though, is I know you had a different view of it than I did, but I think the governor's election in Virginia and of the other gubernatorial candidacies and different elections are proof that the general population, I think there was a push that said the Biden immigration was so bad, people felt it, and they're like, hey, we need to swing the other way. So they swung really far over on Trump. And now I think they're sitting there going, whoa, we might have gone too far. Let's start realigning a little bit left. And I think it does. To me, that is a democracy that is working. It might not be working great, but it is something that you can look at as an American and go, you might not like the fact that, like, well, as a Republican, I can't believe we have a Democratic governor. But you also look at the fact of, like, hey, people that like you described it, that 60% is looking at the way immigration policy is being, whether it's just talking points on the left or not, but like people are hurting because of the immigration policies of this administration. I look at it as an emergency situation because, like, if you have a flood, you're going to probably toss some stuff out that you need later. But I think that's an honest conversation that you have with the population and say, yes, we are doing the best we can to get rid of the worst, but if you do not self-report, if you don't do all these things that we're asking you to do, and that's the other thing is these sanctuary cities, they're kind of setting themselves up for failure. If you're saying, like, okay, I know in Fairfax County, they had a guy the other day that they did not honor an ICE detainer, and the guy ended up killing somebody while he was out.
I think I saw that.
Yeah. And so the sanctuary cities are really screwing their immigrant population, because instead of ICE coming in there and going, okay, I want to detain, let's just say, for example, 20 violent offenders. If I have ICE, guess what? If you start producing like the problems to send ICE to, if you're a sanctuary city, guess what? They don't have time to deport all these other people. It takes effort to get those people in custody and moved out of the country. And why not, like, cooperate and make it work better?
Well, and I think I was trying to keep a list running in my head while you were talking, because going back to my point earlier of it's not a simple subject, it's very complicated. Just in that little bit that you just spoke, we touched on pharmaceuticals, lobbyists, detention and ICE reform, immigration, understanding of sanctuary cities and what they were meant for and what they have been turned into. We talked about judicial reform. You've got plenty of people who were arrested and then were released and then did something else. So why do we have people that have 20 something charges, half of them felonies, still out on the street? So, like, just in that little bit, we touched on judicial reform and immigration policy and healthcare and, all this stuff. It's a tangled spider web of everything. And so to try and pull on one of those strings and solve it inevitably touches on everything else. And so having that simplified conversation or simplified understanding of one talking point, we're just going to focus on this, does a disservice to the big picture. So to go back to immigration as a whole, the talking point over the summer was the left is trying to give immigrants free healthcare. No, I mean there's certain aspects of things where there are means in which certain degrees of immigrant status, meaning are you on a visa, are you undocumented, like whatever it may be, you can obtain certain benefits. If you don't have a social security number, you can't get Medicaid and Medicare, like just can't. Now, can that system be abused? Absolutely. We've seen some of that, as you pointed out, in Minnesota, right? There are ways around that. And so for me, I look at that and go, but the talking point in the beginning was, oh, well, they're giving them, free healthcare. It's like, no, the healthcare that they're getting is emergency care. If you come in and you're bleeding out, it's the Hippocratic Oath. It is that doctor's duty to stabilize and help you. It doesn't matter if you're an illegal immigrant. It doesn't matter if you're a homeless veteran. It doesn't matter if you're just Joe Schmo got in a car accident. That is emergency healthcare, and that accounts for, I think it was like 0.04% of the healthcare spending through Medicaid.
But I think that's the problem, is it's a talking point for the right, that they do not want to invest the time and effort into saying like, hey, there's all these other pieces of it. Yes, you as the person, like the main street, the kitchen table, the reason your healthcare is suffering is because of an influx of a large group of people. That is part of it. So is COVID is part of it. But instead of having that honest conversation, they know they could get their base fired up by saying they're giving this stuff to immigrants. And that's
and what's hard too is if you look at if you start pulling up I use Pew Research and a couple others. Cato Institute has some stuff. But if you want to have if people truly want to have the honest conversation, they say, okay, we're looking at healthcare, and they're blaming immigrants. Immigrants are flooding the system. Well, again, illegal immigrants who don't have a social security number, generally speaking, can't get Medicaid or Medicare, can't get SNAP benefits. Like, yeah, kids might get it through the school or some community programs. It does exist. But generally speaking, if you go and look and say, okay, where do we see the most Medicaid use in the US? Most of it's red states. Most of it's Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Texas is a huge one. Obviously California's on that list as well. They've got a massive population. But what's so interesting to me is the frequency with which the criticism of the left is an admission of the right, saying, oh, the immigrants, the left is just letting immigrants in and they're abusing the welfare system. They can't feasibly get typically get welfare. And it's oftentimes impoverished southern states, or states in general, not just in the South, but typically more red voting states that also utilize these services. I know people, here in Winchester, where you can come across, go watch someone use their EBT card at Walmart, and it's not a Hispanic family. It's a white lady or some dude from, Front Royal or whatever. And so you look at it and you go like, if we're having the honest conversation, do these things happen? Yes, absolutely. Do systems get abused? Yes, absolutely. I think any reasonable person, left or right of center, will not try and sit here and A, talk in definitives, or B, say that it doesn't exist. But the reality of the situation, at least from my perspective, is and I use this example, your water heater goes out, you don't tear down your whole house. You fix the water heater. And so our welfare system or our immigration system, whatever they may be, are they perfect? No, absolutely not. Could they be fixed? Yes. But taking something, so like, using the immigration and the government shutdown and like welfare and all that, here in about 5-8 days, there's about 40 million Americans that are going to see their healthcare benefits and costs change. Most likely go up by 100%, 200%, something like that. And so, do I think the left has the correct answer for our welfare or immigration? No. But to just take something away completely without having a solution just hurts people. In the long run, it just costs, I think back on when we were trying to fire people, cut down the government employment, and we were trying to fire, Doge was trying to make all those cuts. It's like, okay, we're firing 100,000 people on probation. Well, probation for the government could mean I worked my butt off and I just got promoted. So, went from a G11 to a G12, and now I'm on a probationary period because that's just how that works. Now I'm at risk of losing my job, even though I did nothing wrong. So having these conversations and admitting that the left or the right doesn't have it fully correct. There are issues on both sides of those. Understanding that all of these subjects are completely intertwined. Right. And then also being honest about what we're seeing. So you mentioned that for immigration, they were going after the worst of the worst. For me, I don't see that. What I see is 12 people in Boston pulled out of their taking their oath of citizenship and saying, you're not doing this anymore. We're not proceeding with they've done everything right. And we're not proceeding with this because you are now of a nationality that has been deemed no longer viable for citizenship. If it's, I think a couple of them.
But what nationality was that?
I think a couple of them were Afghani. I think a couple of them, it was people related to, or people qualified under whatever Trump's most recent executive order for limiting immigration was. And so, and that's just a small example.
But here's what I'd like to do, and it's one of the things we're going to try it from a technology standpoint. See if you can't pull that up, because that's one of the things that I think is really cool about research. And I think one of the things that we don't want to just talk about stuff. To me, it's the old adage of like, you can either feed a man or you can teach him how to fish, or he can feed himself and others. And so if we can show people like, hey, don't just take the first thing that you have and find 5 more support items that support that. Actually research it out. And so I think
that's a perfect jump in, and I can run the lead on this one on how I would investigate it.
All right.
But to preface with it, AI is a thing. It's coming in. We're living with it. I utilize, when I start research in a subject that you and I talk about or whatever pops up.
When I win.
When you win. But no, what I typically do, A, if it's I just need a quick answer, or B, it's I need a jumping off point. I'll go to Grok, which is X's, formerly Twitter's AI platform. And the reason why I specifically chose that one is I had seen, I think it was like some Instagrams and some TikToks and some other stuff of people using Grok, but trying to force it into a biased answer, trying to manipulate its feedback to be more conservative or be more liberal. And it consistently would push back and say, we can have that conversation, but that's not factually accurate, or that's a biased response, or like it was checking people.
So if that's where you start your research about the information you have from Boston and Grok.
Yeah. And so here's what I would do. Pull this up. So we'll jump over to Grok. And what I would do over here is go, because the key too with it is, if I want to say, conservatives arrest whatever people in whatever location, like that's already presenting a biased approach.
So you have to do a little bit of the work and not shoehorn yourself into the answer you want.
Correct. So for me, what I would say is, can you give me the details on individual and can't spell visuals in Boston removed from citizenship oath? And then up here you can see it says faster. You also have options, auto, expert, whatever. And so just off the cuff, it'll pull up sort of a summary in the beginning. In early December 2025, several immigrants who had already been approved for U.S. citizenship were prevented from taking the oath of allegiance at a naturalization ceremony in Boston's historic Faneuil Hall. So it'll give you this quick little breakdown summary of the event. It'll talk about the affected individuals. So you've got extensive vetting. It says here they completed extensive vetting, background checks, interviews, civics tests, English proficiency requirements.
So one of the things I see when I read this is like, obviously on the right, my first thing is like, oh, but then when I start looking at it, it's like, okay, that is a simulation, because they are learning our language. They're learning they're learning English. And they've gone through the vetting and they've done it the right way, but we're punishing them.
And you also look here at the beginning, it's long-term lawful residents green card holders, which we talked about the other day, is, this isn't illegal immigrants that have worked. These are people who seemingly have been going through things the right way. And for the record,
yeah, but I think the key is, if we can break it down a little bit. So from my standpoint, green card holders, despite, research it yourself, but like what we found in our research, well, I'm not going to speak for you. For me, what I found in the research is you can get a green card, and you can get, if I'm thinking correctly, you can get a green card, and once you're issued that green card, it doesn't expire as long as you can meet the conditions. There are things that can get you disqualified, but once you have it, you have it. And then I also, like, we went over the discussion about, like, okay, are you here legally, not legally? And what happened is what my understanding of what happened is, they would go to the border during the Biden administration. You'd have caravans. Remember the caravans? They come up there and they'd say, I'm seeking asylum. And what they would do is they would give them a date. So they hadn't officially been given asylum because they hadn't been vetted, but they're allowed in the country. And then that goes into the show ups and everything else. But go back to your point. These are the countries involved.
Yeah. So this was some of it. Well, and to this again. So the slight tangent is, are we talking immigration, or are we talking asylum reform? Because that's a completely valid and important conversation to have, because you are absolutely correct that I show up, hey, you need to be at the courthouse. It's December now. It's, oh, you need to be at the courthouse July 5th, this upcoming July. I'm not illegal. I'm also not legal. I'm in this process. And throughout that, they can still then not grant me asylum. That's the whole thing, is asylum is a request. It doesn't have to be granted. And oftentimes it's not. It's granted at a very low rate, but it's how long am I here before that? And in that time, can I just sort of disappear? That does happen.
And that's the crazy thing too, is a whole different group of people are ones that cross illegally. They don't seek asylum. So they didn't turn themselves into Border Patrol. They weren't like processed in. If they're here for a year and they get caught, they are here considered illegally because they can't apply for asylum after a year.
And to me, that's where I would say, like, that specific group, the ones that seemingly put no effort into any attempt to follow the right pathway, that there is your illegal immigrant. If we're defining it, to me, that's your illegal immigrant. Just coming here on...
I'm 1 out of 5.
There you go.
Just kidding.
So anyway, so looking at this talking point here, again, looking into the research of it, you can sit. I recommend, again, you have to make sure that you're asking the right question in a balanced manner, but it gives you the quick gist. And you asked earlier, what were these people? It's like, okay, so here are your targeted countries, but specifically, these are the ones that these people seem to be associated with. So you've got Afghanistan, Haiti, Iran, Yemen. A lot of these make sense. You got to think, Yemen, Sudan, Iran.
How do you think Somalia got on there?
Pirates.
Minnesota, baby.
Well, Minnesota. Yeah. Okay, I forgot about that. But yeah, Venezuela makes a whole bunch of sense, all things considered. So these are areas that we're tracking. If I'm looking at this list, I would go drugs, terrorists. Like these being the reasons for why these are on the list, is you're looking like, Iran supports ISIS.
I'll take it a step further. Vetting processes from those countries to get to our country just isn't as strong. I mean, Afghanistan, that's one of the things about it, is the Taliban is the group of individuals that control that country. They control who gets a visa. They control all of that, who gets to travel. And so there's no guarantee that the person that we are receiving is the person that they say they are. So, which is one of the biggest problems about vetting. When I was in Afghanistan, the biggest problem is it's not like here where you have a birth certificate and you can track it back. Like it's third world, and drop it down 3 or 4 notches of what they're doing in Afghanistan. So it is tribal, and the information does not flow freely.
And to your point earlier with the Afghan dude that did the terrible things, he was vetted by the CIA. He was vetted by the Biden administration. He was confirmed and vetted by the Trump administration this past May. So to claim that he's this unknown,
I think that to me is a disgrace as a country for us. And the sad part about it is his family was affected negatively, and that poor young lady from West Virginia that just signed up to serve her country is killed in her own country, and that's just uncalled for.
It's awful. But it's my point of being true with the narrative of making this guy sound like he was, because some of the talking points I heard was he was just this crazy illegal that came in or whatever. And it's like, no, we knew who this guy was.
Yeah.
Does that justify, like, does that, is
but
that
but I think that's what causes half the problem is that we have such the powers that be are so one-sided and less. One of the things that we talk about in less law enforcement is lacks candor, and I think that is something that describes most politicians is they lack candor as far as they will find a talking point even if they know the rest of the story. I think about all this crap with the Epstein files and everything else. There's dirty on both sides of the aisle, and let's not pretend and let's not. It's just I think that's the bad part about it is that like I always think about it used to be that you could go to local media, and maybe this is the wave of the future with AI is like that's the only way we're going to get real news. You got to be honest about how you plug the information in to get good information back. But like to me, that's one of the coolest things about the discussions is you now have a tool to go in there, and as long as you do not put your bias into it, and that's what I would challenge people is take the time to realize. I think one of the things is that realize that there are people out there that may have that definitely have different life experiences, and they are not that much different than you are. They really aren't. And I think that's one of the things that being in the military teaches you. You can have people from all over the country. I remember our drill sergeant told us over and over and over again, you bleed green. And if we did a better job of saying like, hey, as an American, I don't hate you because you don't believe the same thing that I do, and I don't want to have an argument with you. And I think one of the things that I want to do is I want to put information out there, arrive at I don't think either one of us got pissed off at each other or like through stuff or anything else. Like I accept the information that you gave me. I feel like you did a really good job presenting it, and I think more discussions like this need to happen. Not only over dinner tables. Christmas is coming. Maybe people can have
don't talk politics at Christmas.
Well, I mean, if we talk it like this, it's not that horrible. I mean, it really isn't.
That's supposed to be a discussion. It's not supposed to be I'm winning.
Yes, and I think that's the problem. I think the problem is that we are depending on people to lead us that lack candor and lack the ability to lead because they are to me they're compromised because they aren't looking out for who elected them. And there are some exceptions.
But again, I look back and I mentioned in the beginning, and to kind of jump back to the research and show like how I go through this process, it's not putting yourself in an echo chamber. And it's also I personally feel like I have to go into this being willing to be wrong, being willing to admit I thought it was this and then it wasn't. And that's okay. It's 100% okay to be wrong. So when you're looking, jumping back over and like how I would continue this research, and the reason why I start with places like Grok is right here at the bottom. It gives you a list of all of the websites where they collected this information from. A lot of it's the Boston Globe, it's local Fox and CBS affiliates. So it's hard sometimes when a subject comes out, and there was one a while back. I can't remember what it is right now,
you gave me a good point. Click down at the bottom. This is the kind of stuff that bothers me.
Which one?
I'm pointing at Senator Markey.
This one that I'm on?
Yeah, just read that.
All right.
I mean, just read the
reject the cookies. We'll go back.
All right.
All right. So Senator Markey, at least 2 people were told to step out of line after they arrived at the venue, according to Gail Brislow, Executive Director of Project Citizenship.
What's the headline?
Oh, gotcha. Condemns cruel and calculated racism by ICE agents. And that's a very divisive presentation. So you're looking at Senator Markey, who is seemingly, based on that quote, feeding into the current division we have with ICE. Now, I can personally disagree with the utilization of how we are using ICE. That's a different conversation for a different day. But when you do look, and this is an important thing when you're doing your research, is understanding what the intent of the person is, understanding if it's a clickbait title, like is this just they pulled 4 words out of a comment he made, so you can look at it and go, cruel and calculated racism by ICE agents, that's divisive and cutting towards the right.
Okay, and let's go up one and read the the immigration.
This one here.
Yep. Just the headline.
Blocked a Boston citizenship ceremony under USCIS new high risk policy for National Guard shootings.
All right, so there's the problem. This is a classic example of what the problem is.
Yeah, tell me what you see in those two.
What I see in those is I see two opposing viewpoints. I feel like Senator Markey has a reason to be upset about what happened. Mm-hmm. It is a her, right?
I don't actually know off the top of my head.
I think it's anyway. They put this information out there, and it's like to get people fired up. Yes, what happened was bad.
It's a man, Ed Markey.
I'm sorry, Ed. But that was a dumb statement. These dudes aren't racist. They are doing what they are told to do. But to go on the other side, so I feel like that's a screw up on the left side. The using that language about mm-hmm. agents that are doing what they're told to do, it's lawful. It's just to call them a racist and a fascist, all that crap has to go. But if I move up to immigration, we screwed that up. We created a situation. And instead of being honest and upfront and saying, hey, there's a really good chance. This is not a chance for us to further our immigration policy. Maybe we should need to take a look at it and go, hey, this dude gave everything he had for this country in his own country and his family is paying the price of our crappy withdrawal. And so because of our bad policy, not only is his family in jeopardy, he probably lost family members, but now we've lost a National Guard soldier. And that is not an immigration problem. That 100% is a problem with bad policy, and a policy that the right is reacted to because it fits the dialogue of, oh, these immigrants are doing these hideous things. No, he was a U.S. asset that kept probably a bunch of soldiers, just like that poor girl that died, alive in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. He did that job, and he's frustrated, understandably so. It doesn't give him the right to kill somebody.
Correct.
But don't use that as a launch point for your policy of like, okay, well, now we pissed off. I think about how we fought the war on terror. We bombed the shit out of people, and then we don't understand why their kids are so upset when they've seen their parents, other family members blown up indiscriminately. And this is the same thing over here in this country.
And that's how you get radicalization anywhere, domestically or foreign. But you look at it too. So like to look at, to your points here in these titles as well, is so sure, I agree with you, Senator Mark, like that's some strong language. But the other thing where my brain would go if I'm researching this is that's 4 words of a sentence. What preceded it, context does matter. What preceded it, what followed it. Is it an extreme stance? Yes. But reading the full, like to me, that's an attention grabber. Mm-hmm. And I could get into it. I could read the full thing and it not change the context of it. It's someone said it a while ago. I think with maybe an Epstein thing or whatever, or doesn't matter what, but it's right. If you put something back into context and it doesn't change the message, then it was never taken out of context.
Well, and I think that's the whole thing with that is calculated racism by ICE agents.
Yeah.
They're enforcing a policy. If you want to call the policy, you believe the policy is racist. Yeah. That's one thing, but it is not the ICE agents that had it. And in the same way, National Guard shootings weren't despite what we want, even though it fits the rights dialogue, that is not, in my opinion, based on my experience in that country and other things, I do not believe that is a dude that came over here and said, hey, I came here to kill Americans. No, he got frustrated with the way things are being run.
And I think with the immigration aspect of it, where you look, and because you're absolutely right for the most part that ICE agents are doing their job, whether we agree or whether I agree or not that's what they should be doing right now. That's a different topic. But the fact of the matter is they're doing the job that they're being assigned.
Right.
And most of them are probably just, for lack of a better term, grunts, just coming in, clocking in, doing their job. It's what they're getting paid for. So when you look at the rhetoric, the conversations that are being had at a higher level the senators or presidents or whoever, that stuff trickles down to the face on the street.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't in any way support, what's it called when they find the names and post,
Oh, it's doxing.
Doxing. Yeah. Any left or right, whatever, that's awful. It just makes a situation worse. But when you look, and I think back when we're, specifically talking about immigration, I think back over the last year, and it was coming from the largest voice on the stage. 30, millions of Haitians are coming and eating all the cats and whatnot. It's like, no, that was disproven almost immediately. And it started from a Facebook post that someone ran with. And so when all Latinos are coming over are murderers and gangbangers and drug dealers. It's like, no. Do they exist? Yes. But taking a group and making them, quote unquote, the worst of the worst for all of them does not help the average day-to-day person take a step back from that emotionally charged subject and be able to be patient with it, for lack of a better comparison. But it's that, he says we're going after, my stance with it is you're going after the worst of the worst. Okay. Why are we arresting people at immigration meetings? Why are we arresting people off of farms where they're working or construction sites? Like, are they illegal? Sure. Could they be associated with, drugs? Maybe. But the fact of the matter is, where I don't, and it could just simply be we don't see it because it doesn't fit the narrative, but where I don't see people are, I don't see ICE going into the Latin Kings gang neighborhood in, South LA or wherever it is and pursuing those people. To me, that's the worst of the worst. And so like, that's where I think the left side of it is.
Yeah. And that's a good discussion and a good launch point for next time we get together, because we have run out of time. But I do think that that's a very valid point. And I can tell you from an operational standpoint and a law enforcement standpoint, these agents are not going to go into the areas like that without local support.
No, absolutely.
And I think that's why what happened in DC happened is because local law enforcement wasn't equipped to handle what they thought was a supporting mission. So, for example, when you have special operations and you have a tier 1 unit going in to do an extraction or hostage rescue or whatever, you have rangers and stuff like securing the perimeter and everything else. And that's how they were using the National Guard and they've done a lot of really good things in DC. And I'd like to hear more about what's going on in DC. And I think that's a good topic to start with the next time we get together, because like from my standpoint, yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. We can't go after the worst of the worst because we don't have the operational support that we need to go in there, because we can't secure it. I mean, if you think about it, all the crap that happened in LA with the riots, and he sent the National Guard out there and they're raising Cain about that. The sad part about it is these federal agents can still be charged under local codes for homicide or assault or anything else. And like, I can tell you from being in law enforcement, you don't want to go somewhere where you stand to be charged criminally in an area that's unfriendly to law enforcement. So
yeah, which I get that.
Yeah, dude, I like this. The time has flown by, and I really appreciate your time. I really would like to do this again.
Absolutely.
That's where we can kick off next week. We can kick off about worst of the worst and how we get operationally secure enough where we can go after the worst of the worst.
Yeah, and that's
because until then, like the government plays the numbers game. The numbers game, or we have this many people on welfare. We need to cut the welfare rolls. We're this much money in debt. We're all this stuff, and it doesn't translate down to the average person. So
and we can try and keep it narrowed to just
We'll just have to expand our time frame. So, all right, I appreciate your time, and like I said, we'll get together again very soon.